Some buildings do not just fill a skyline. They tell you who ruled, what people worshipped, and where power was supposed to live. That is what Gothic architecture could do at its peak. A coronation church was never just a church. A relic chapel was never just a chapel. A pilgrimage cathedral was a public statement in stone. In this video, we're visiting 10 of Europe's greatest Gothic sites, not just as masterpieces of architecture, but as places where monarchy, pilgrimage, faith, politics, and memory were built straight into the walls. Ready? Let's roam. Number 10. Westminster Abbey, England. For nearly 1,000 years, English monarchy has kept coming back to Westminster Abbey. The present church was begun by Henry III in 1245 around the shrine of Edward the Confessor, but the site had already been royal and sacred for generations. Edward's Abbey was consecrated in 1065, and Westminster has been the coronation church since 1066. That alone puts it in rare company. But Westminster was never only about coronations. Kings and queens were buried here. So were statesmen, scientists, and writers. Poets' Corner turned the Abbey into something larger than a royal church, one of the places where England chose who it wanted to remember. That is why Westminster still carries so much force. Coronation, burial, and national memory all ended up in the same building. Number 9. Reims Cathedral, France. French kings were not crowned just anywhere. Reims was tied to that role for deep historical reasons. The city's prestige reaches back to the baptism of Clovis by Saint Remy at the end of the 5th century, one of the defining moments in the making of Christian kingship in France. In the 9th century, Archbishop Hincmar fixed the coronation tradition at Reims, and the later Gothic cathedral gave that tradition a setting that looked exactly the part. The facade is crowded with sculpture, but nothing feels loose or chaotic. It feels formal, deliberate, almost ceremonial in its control. Then history hit the building again. Reims was badly damaged in the First World War, and the restoration gave it a second life in modern French memory. This cathedral did not just stand through history, it became part of the story more than once. Number 8. St. Vitus Cathedral, Prague, Czech Republic. St. Vitus did not appear on empty ground. Long before the Gothic cathedral rose above Prague Castle, this hill had already become sacred and political terrain. First came a rotunda linked to Prince Wenceslas around 925, then a Romanesque basilica after 1060. Then in 1344, Charles IV began the Gothic cathedral that would turn the site into the religious and dynastic center of Bohemia. That long build-up is the key. The later cathedral became a coronation church, a royal burial place, a shrine of St. Wenceslas, and the home of the crown chamber, where the Bohemian coronation jewels are kept. St. Vitus does not feel like a cathedral standing next to power. It feels like rulership, sainthood, burial, and ceremony were always meant to meet here. Number 7. Palace of the Popes, Avignon, France. When the papacy left Rome in the 14th century, Avignon became one of the power centers of Europe. You can see that history immediately in the Palace of the Popes. 7 popes lived here, and during the Western Schism, Avignon was also tied to rival papal claimants. This is not the soft, luminous side of Gothic architecture. It is massive, defensive, and administrative. The walls are huge, the towers are hard-edged, and the whole place feels built to keep authority intact under pressure. That is what makes Avignon so important in a list like this. It shows that Gothic architecture was not only used to lift the eye upward, it could also be used to hold power together on the ground. Number 6. Seville Cathedral and the Giralda, Spain. Seville shows how conquest can change a city without wiping its past away. The cathedral was founded in 1403 on the site of the city's former mosque, and it grew into the largest Gothic building in Europe. But the strongest part of the site is the Giralda. It began as the Almohad minaret of the mosque before being adapted into the cathedral's bell tower, so the skyline still preserves both histories at once. That is why Seville lands so hard. One religious and political order replaced another, but the city did not start from zero. The older world stayed visible. Few places show the layered history of medieval Spain more clearly than this one. Number 5. Milan Cathedral, Italy. Most cathedrals tell you about one era. Milan tells you about persistence. Construction began in 1386, and in 1387, the Veneranda Fabbrica del Duomo was founded to carry the work forward. The new cathedral rose in the area of the earlier basilicas of Santa Maria Maggiore and Santa Tecla, and from that point on, the Duomo became more than a single generation's project. It became a long civic and religious effort handed forward across centuries. The forest of pinnacles, the hundreds of statues, the pale marble skin, none of it came from a quick burst of building. It came from a city that kept choosing to pour ambition into the same monument. Milan is Gothic architecture stretched across time without going small. Number 4. Chartres Cathedral, France. Chartres was already one of the great pilgrimage sites of medieval Europe before the famous Gothic rebuilding began. The reason was the relic known as the Veil of the Virgin, often called the Sancta Camisia, or Holy Shirt, which drew generations of pilgrims to the cathedral. Then came the fire of 1194. What followed was one of the great rebuilding campaigns of the Middle Ages, carried out over roughly 26 years with a speed and coherence that still show in the finished building. That is why Chartres feels so complete. It was rebuilt not just to replace what had been lost, but to restore the standing of a place people already believed in deeply. Chartres looks like a pilgrimage center taking its place back after disaster. Number 3. Notre-Dame de Paris, France. Notre-Dame became important more than once. The first stone was laid in 1163 under Bishop Maurice de Sully, as Paris was growing into one of the great cities of medieval Europe. Over time, the cathedral became one of the defining monuments of French Gothic architecture. But the later history is what gives it unusual depth. The French Revolution damaged it badly. The building declined. Then 19th century France, pushed in part by Victor Hugo and shaped in part by the Restoration led by Viollet-le-Duc, chose to save it. The fire of April 15th, 2019 forced that choice all over again in front of the whole world. When Notre Dame reopened in December 2024, it returned not only as a cathedral, but as a building people had now fought to keep more than once. Number 2. Sainte-Chapelle, Paris, France. Louis IX did not build Sainte-Chapelle as an ordinary chapel. He built it to bring the prestige of the Passion into the center of French kingship. Raised within the royal palace on the Ile de la Cité in less than 7 years, it was designed to house the crown of thorns and other relics tied to Christ's Passion, including a fragment of the true cross. That tells you exactly what kind of place this was, royal, sacred, and political at the same time. The 15 stained glass bays and their 1,113 scenes do more than decorate the space. They turn the chapel into a visual statement about kingship, scripture, and sacred authority. Sainte-Chapelle is one of the clearest examples in Europe of architecture being used to fuse monarchy and relic cult into one overwhelming space. Number 1. Cologne Cathedral, Germany. Cologne changed when relics associated with the three kings were brought to the city in 1164. The great shrine made for them, created between about 1190 and 1220, turned Cologne into one of the great pilgrimage cities of medieval Europe and demanded a monumental setting worthy of what it held. That is where the story really starts. The Gothic cathedral that followed, begun in 1248, was not simply a very large church. It was a deliberate answer to the presence of one of the most prized relic cults in Christendom. Even more remarkable, when the building was finally completed in 1880, the later work stayed strikingly faithful to the original medieval design. The result is a building where pilgrimage, relic prestige, urban pride, and Gothic scale all come together at full force. What ties these places together is not just style, it is purpose. Gothic architecture crowned rulers, guarded relics, drew pilgrims, housed dynasties, stabilized institutions, and taught entire cities where power was supposed to live. These buildings were never just beautiful, and they were never neutral. They were built to persuade. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe for more history-driven travel, and let me know what I should cover next. Until next time, keep roaming.